ye, hear ye, my dear royal attendants, we are officially in wedding season. Oh, spring is here, the flowers are blooming, and the church bells are ringing. And while I had a lot of fun last year planning our wedding, I am very thankful to be done. I read a thread recently that said many people, especially women, get so into wedding planning because it's one of the few ways we can kind of unapologetically blend a lot of creative passions, especially in a society that doesn't really value most of the more feminine coded or domestic hobbies. I both loved and hated wedding planning. I hated it because of the time constraints and trying to do everything as cheaply as possible while rampant inflation rages, and all the people wrangling that had to happen. Not my strong suit. But I loved it for the creative aspects, choosing colors, designing invitations and other signage, and thinking of meaningful details to include. So many of the decisions I made, from the type of guestbook I used, to the cake topper, to the wedding favors, all had a lot of thought and meaning behind them. And because the meaning behind the decisions isn't always obvious at the wedding itself, I wanted to make a video talking about my favorite wedding details because I think they deserve more time in the spotlight. And this is my channel, so I can do what I want. Let's go. Starting out, I knew I wanted to do something non-traditional for the guestbook, but finding something that felt authentic to me was difficult. But then I saw a TikTok of a painting guestbook and I couldn't get it out of my head. But with enough research and making sure it was okay to have acrylic paint at the wedding venue, we were able to make it happen. So it provided both a fun activity for guests to do while waiting and a tangible thing for us to keep rather than a book that gets dusty in a box in the attic. And anyone who knows me knows how much I love art and crafting, so it honestly just seemed very fitting for my personality. A disclaimer, a lot of these details are very Caitlin-centric. That's not to say that poor Eric didn't get a vote in any of this. Pretty much every decision was either brainstormed with or at least run by him. But I am definitely the creative and ideas person in our relationship when it comes to event planning. Like, I asked him what our wedding color should be, and he said, black and white, and didn't understand at first why I wasn't enthusiastic about that choice. Okay, back to the details. Next, we have all the graphic design I did. The invitations were somewhat the bane of my existence, but at the same time, I deeply love them. I just spent a lot of time and tears on them. Mostly because I liked a design that I saw on the knot, but I didn't like how busy the image was. And you'll notice a pattern here as I go through these, but I'm like, well, I can do that. And so I recreated the invitation design and the orientation I wanted and was much happier with it. I also did all the signage for the wedding, with my favorite probably being the signature drink sign, where I created watercolor portrait images of our cats, Finn and Gwen. Pretty much all my signage was modeled after an amalgam of signs I saw on Pinterest and Etsy. My general rule is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I was not out here trying to reinvent the wheel graphic design-wise. But I'm adept enough at Photoshop and Illustrator, I could save myself a little bit of money by making my own signs and then printing them off at Staples and throwing them in some acrylic photo holders. Also, speaking of signature drinks, I had the Finn and the Gwen. The Finn was an alcoholic green apple sangria, a little more on the tart or sour side. The Gwen was a non-alcoholic raspberry lemonade, something a little more sweet. Basically, I tried to match our cats' personalities and ages with the drink selection. I don't know if anyone actually picked up on that. For favors, again, I knew I wanted to find something a little unique, and we were really focusing on experiences over like physical things where possible. So we ended up doing a photo booth, which I think people really liked. The photos are great, and they had lightsabers for us to use as props, which I know my younger and older cousins were having a blast posing with them. It's also common to have a memorial table to remember all the family members who've passed. And because I lost both my grandmother last March and my aunt in July, it felt important to honor their memory a little extra. I really love the concept of saving them a seat during the ceremony, so I made memorial seat signs for both them and for Eric's grandfather. And then I also had the corsage my grandmother would have worn made and placed in her seat. One of the last things I decided on was the cake topper, because I went in thinking I wanted something just super simple, like a K and an E or monogram or maybe nothing at all. But pretty much everything I looked at online was just not the vibe. I did like the little custom clay pet statues I saw, but those were like $50 to $70 per pet at minimum, and that was just out of the budget. But then I ended up finding this really reasonably priced clay cat cake topper that could be customized with painting, and it was like everything kind of fell into place. We got an adorable cat cake topper, and now we have a little trinket to display on the shelf and remember our wedding day. It's so cute. Another last minute decision I made was that I wanted a welcome sign of some kind. And did I decide basically 3 weeks before the wedding that I wanted to design one that had flowers and a cat that looked like Finn, and then have it custom printed and mailed from Staples? Yes. Yes, I did. That was a very stressful weekend trying to design it and use as many prefab vector elements as I could, but also color match everything to my color palette. And I know Eric was over there internally going, are we sure that this is the most important detail you could be stressing about right now? Oh, it definitely wasn't. We still hadn't picked the music, but it came out looking super cool, so I'm proud of it at least. And speaking of stress, probably my biggest stressor was the seating chart. Now, did I decide early on that I wanted to model it after these gorgeous mirror seating charts I saw online? Absolutely. Did I wait until the last 2 weeks to actually start putting it together? Unfortunately, yes. Other than teaching myself how to use a Cricut and deciding on the perfect font pairing, no, really, there were so many options. It really wasn't that complicated of a project. I'm not crazy. I didn't try to have all the guest names in vinyl on the mirror. But the mirror. I got it at Sam's for $150 back in like March, which was a great deal, but it was over 6 feet tall, and it was a nightmare trying to work with in our small apartment that doesn't have quite enough space to have a 6-foot mirror on the floor and the ability to navigate around it without stepping on it. I did it, but the vinyl text did come out a wee bit crooked, and transporting it the 2.5 hours to the venue was also less than ideal. So I'm very thankful to my matron of honor, Alana, and her husband, who were able to just fit it in their vehicle and bring it from Richmond, so we had room to take everything else we needed in our cars. Word to the wise, I would maybe choose a slightly smaller mirror. Next, I want to highlight just a little bit of the music selection because that was another thing I agonized over. Now, we did pick our first dance song pretty early because we heard a slower, more acoustic cover of Katy Perry's Teenage Dream on a show we watched. And it really was an earworm. And the more we thought about it, the more it fit. Because we met in high school, we reconnected as adults, and Stephen Dawes' version is just beautiful. But then it came to what I was going to walk down the aisle to, and that was a lot more difficult to decide on. Until, after a lot of intense Spotify music searching, I found a Midnight String Quartet cover of Such Great Heights by the Postal Service, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. And Eric and I both love the Postal Service. We went to their 20th anniversary album tour in 2023. So I played it for him, almost jokingly being like, I could walk down the aisle to the Postal Service, ha ha ha. But he was like, Caitlin, I think this is it. And it really was perfect. Okay, we're down to my last 2 favorite wedding details, the shoes and the dress. The shoes are definitely a detail. I'm not sure if the dress is technically a detail because it's usually one of the bigger decisions you make when planning a wedding, but it's special to me, so I'm gonna include it. I knew going in I wanted something fun to wear for shoes. And I also knew that while I love some fancy heels, I didn't want to have to deal with my feet hurting or having to change the shoes between the ceremony and the reception. I kept seeing these really unique bridal embroidered Converse and Keds, and I personally love wearing Converse, so it just seemed meant to be. And considering there was a hurricane in the days leading up to my wedding that dumped something like 9 inches of rain on my outdoor venue, I'm thankful I was wearing sneakers instead of heels because it was muddy. But here's where my bridal delusion started setting in. It's early July, and I'm still indecisive on how much I want to spend on wedding shoes. My goal was $100, but some of these custom embroidered shoes were like $300 plus, and that just seemed like too much. So I start thinking, I'm crafty. Why don't I just teach myself how to embroider and do it myself? How hard could it be? Plus, I'd learn a new skill. I feel like you can probably agree that 3 months out from my wedding was maybe not the best time to decide to learn a new skill. Fortunately, I realized I was being delulu, and with some more searching on Etsy, found a listing within my budget and got those instead. and I absolutely love them. It's got our initials, wedding date, and wedding colors and the flowers. And best of all, it's not just one and done wedding shoes. I can wear them in my everyday life. I wish I'd taken a picture of how muddy these were after the wedding, but I was able to get them surprisingly clean, so good for me. And now we've finally made it to the dress. The wedding dress was one of the things I was most excited about. I wanted to feel ethereal and like a fairy princess. I also kind of wanted to find something with removable sleeves so that I could have long sleeves for the ceremony and then go sleeveless for the reception. Essentially, a dress change without the extra cost of a second dress. I definitely thought I wanted something relatively poofy with a lot of details on the skirt, a V neckline, embroidery, and above all, something unique. I tried on a fair amount of dresses, many of them with that ball gown or A-line silhouette and V neckline, but they just weren't hitting the way that I wanted them to. The dress I ended up choosing though, on the hanger wasn't exactly what I was imagining. It had a square neckline and a relatively simple chiffon A-line skirt. But when I put it on, oh boy, it gave me that like elven princess vibe I'd been searching for. And then I saw the gorgeous floral embroidered train and it was like, ooh, this is maybe it. Here's the photo that I love and that kind of convinced me that this was my dress because it captures the perfect expression on my face where I'm just looking in the mirror and going, wow, this is beautiful. I feel beautiful. Now I mentioned earlier about how muddy it was because of the hurricane. And did that beautiful lace train get absolutely covered in Virginia red mud? Yes, but it was 100% worth it. And I think, oddly enough, a beautiful reminder of how fun and perfect the day was. Neither rain nor mud were going to ruin our beautiful day. There is so much more I could talk about with our wedding. Like, there's still details I've left out, but this video is long enough. I guess the lesson here is that there are so many ways to infuse meaning into your wedding, or really any kind of special event. And while the vast majority of your guests might not know the meanings behind the details, it doesn't make it any less fun to create during the planning process or to see how everything comes together the day of. So tell me down in the comments, is there a detail from your wedding or event or even a wedding you've attended that you absolutely loved? Or maybe hated, although hate's a strong word. Maybe a detail you were surprised by. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and turn on that notification bell so you're the first to know when there's a new video. I'll see you guys later. Bye!